right, welcome back to the Path of Titans podcast. It's been a while. I figure what we could do is I'm here with Matt, and we could probably introduce ourselves. So I'm Jiggy. I'm the project lead on Path of Titans, and I also do a lot of the art and technical art on the game.
Cool. And I'm Matthew, the programmer. Sometimes I use the word intern in Discord to troll people.
Are you sure you want to use that as the intro?
Yep.
All right. Yes, the intern. Great. So, I want to kind of welcome everyone back to the Path of Titans podcast. It has been a while. So, the reason why we're bringing back the Path of Titans podcast was because as a team, we've been working on a lot of things recently, and it's been a little bit tough trying to fit all of it into the monthly dev blogs that we've been doing. And the monthly dev blogs also don't answer community questions. So what we're basically doing is the first half of the podcast, we want to cover things that the development team has been working on. And then towards the end, I'd like to answer any questions that the community might have. We have a few questions here that have been asked, and we've gone ahead and picked out some of the things that we think we could elaborate on the best. And there's plenty to talk about. Yeah, the engine upgrade. Yeah, so Path of Titans is built in Unreal Engine. That's the game engine that we use. And Unreal Engine, that's developed by Epic Games, they release regular updates and upgrades over time. So just as kind of due diligence, we always make sure to upgrade and update the game as fast as we can to try and stay on the kind of bleeding edge of it all. And in that case, this next patch that's going to be coming out quite soon is going to be upgrading from Unreal Engine version 5.3 to 5.5. So I guess the question might be, well, what does that mean for the game? It's actually a really great improvement, especially for mobile players and anyone who might be having not so great performance on mobile. It will bring definitely good memory improvements, and it actually also fixes a couple critical crashes that we were kind of banging our heads against trying to figure out with Samsung Galaxy phones. Thankfully, that's all been fixed on 5.5. So if that was an issue that you were running into, you should be great now. And also, I guess it does bring a lot of tools for developers. So, myself and Matt working on the game inside this new Unreal Engine version, some of the things that I was really enjoying actually was being a technical artist, I have to try and figure out any rendering problems that we might be having on different platforms. And 5.5 actually lets me much more accurately render like a preview of what the game is going to look like on a whole bunch of different devices, especially on mobile, like OpenGL and Vulkan, and those kind of like rendering pipelines. It's been really great. So I've been able to fix a bunch of like rendering bugs if things appeared like pixelated or low resolution or even just, noisy or grainy or stuff like that. I've been able to fix up a bunch of them. Are there any things that you, Matt, have found you've been really enjoying from Unreal Engine 5.5?
For me, it's the amount of time it takes to build the games being a little quicker, and so iterations a lot faster. There's some things broken with it, but overall it's an improvement.
Yeah, I know that in general, having the fast iteration time on game builds is just so essential, isn't it?
Yeah, if it takes you like 2 hours to check if you fixed a bug or something like that, can really slow things down.
Yeah, right. Anyway, so that's kind of what we're doing there on the upgrade. It definitely was a lot of work because porting the engine up two versions at once kind of means that we're hopscotching some of the fixes and changes that may have been done on 5.4. And now that it's on 5.5, there's just a lot more to test. And QA testers have been our QA testers have been working really hard on ensuring everything's completely at parity and not broken, and everything's been working fine. So, yeah, but that's it's looking good. We don't seem to have any other remaining issues with 5.5, so we're moving forward on that one.
Cool. Tell us about the critter improvements.
Yeah, so this next patch that'll be coming up will also be including a bunch of critter improvements that we've been making. I guess I wanted to talk a bit about why critters are our priority right now, as opposed to something else. Right now, in general, the critters do have a very important, I guess, role in the game. They're a big source of food for carnivores, especially the younger carnivores who can't hunt a full dinosaur quite yet. They add a bit of danger in the world for smaller players, so it's not just easy to hide in a bush all the time because a critter might be in there. And it also really, I think it really does help with immersion and just feeling like the world is a bit more lived in. So, but that being said, with all of those things about why they're important, there's definitely some things that we wanted to address sooner rather than later. One of the things is that they're actually really easy to hunt once you kind of know how they work, especially once you're a larger dinosaur. They're just kind of trivial and it is not as engaging as it really could be. And also, once you're a large dinosaur or fully grown in some way, they're pretty much no longer threatening to you in any way, even though they sometimes can attack some creatures. And there's also not much variety. They're very predictable. So if a critter, you see it at Didelphodon, it runs at you, runs away, very, very consistent and too predictable. So there's a couple of things that we're adding in this next patch. The biggest thing is basically critter growth. So the critters have a growth system pretty similar to dinosaurs. We've introduced the concept of baby critters, adult critters, I guess also like subadult critters, and kind of that growth stages in between baby and adult. And then the final thing that we've also done is added something called alpha critters. And alpha critters they're much larger than adult critters, and they're much stronger, but they also provide a lot more food, and they have like a unique kind of look to them, and they do different attack types, like bone break or toxin that the adult version of the critter wouldn't have necessarily done. And they have like a unique skin as well, so you can kind of tell them apart from a regular adult critter from a distance. And these guys are much rarer. These alpha critters are much rarer. You're not going to find them too often, but when you do, you'll have to consider if you're going to attack them and take the risk, or maybe just run and leave it for someone else to deal with. And then, additionally, there are the baby critters as well. And what's really neat with the baby critters is they're pretty much scared of everything at all times, and they don't really do much damage as well. So if you're a younger player or like a younger dinosaur, you should definitely try and aim to catch and hunt those baby critters, because they'll give you a decent amount of food, but they're actually quite easy once you know where to find them, or are able to get your claws into them. So, yeah.
And so the critters might finally better get revenge and kill all those players that have been hunting them down mercilessly across the whole map.
Yeah, you'll want to keep an eye out. Here's the thing, like Didelphodon, it'll attack you now if you're a little guy, right? So just be careful. They're not quite as passive as they used to be. But with that being said, that's some of the stuff that's coming in this next patch. But that's kind of not all we're done with. We do want to really improve critters in the future, because they're kind of like a stopgap in between kind of like an AI critter versus a full AI dinosaur. And if we can get these guys working really well, then it only makes it easier when we do AI dinosaurs. So in this case, some of the improvements that we really want to see in the future are more behavior types for the critters. Like maybe certain critters are just passive until you attack them. They'll kind of just ignore you, right, until you attack them or do damage to them. Or perhaps some critters are more defensive. If you attack another critter nearby, they might kind of come to its rescue and try and, team up to try and take you out. I'd also like to see if we can get more variety in the critter attacks and their attacking patterns, so that it's not as consistent and easy to kind of predict what they're going to do next. And really then the end goal after all of those types of improvements is just making sure that we have the it's kind of like amphibious creatures, where you can have a critter that can seamlessly transition between walking around on the land and swimming in the water. I know right now we do really want to have some kind of like a crocodile type critter, but right now it's a lot of work to try and have the critter go from basically land navigation and then moving seamlessly and transitioning into water navigation, because they're two completely different movement types, and they use a different I guess like a different locomotion state, if that makes sense. And it's very difficult to transition them. So we can totally do it. And we're working on it. But until then, it will be just the land critters for now.
Cool. Tell us about some of the audio and footstep improvements we'll be doing.
Yeah, so for some of the audio improvements, a lot of the audio improvements that we're making on Path of Titans has been based on community feedback. One of the things that initially instigated it was some of the feedback that solo players were mentioning, where when they're trying to kind of be sneaky or hide away from perhaps a larger group of dinosaurs and sneak on by, a lot of us solo players, they're listening very carefully to the environment, trying to figure out where are other players? Can I go and find them? Can I hide myself away from them? And a lot of it is going to be dependent on if the dinosaur is roaring in the distance, but also its footsteps. And when it came to the footsteps, previously we had this issue where you couldn't really hear the footsteps until they're basically right on top of you. And if that was the case and you're a solo player and there's maybe 2 other dinosaurs hunting you, that might not be enough time to actually be able to react and realistically be able to get away. We've kind of, based on all of that community feedback, we went ahead and focused on the footsteps first. So the first thing we've done is pretty much completely overhauled our footstep system. The footsteps now travel much, much further than they did before, especially if they're a larger dinosaur. But they also have it's not just that it's a footstep sound and the volume is maybe 50% quieter when it's at a distance. It actually has like a dedicated sort of reverberating, echoing footstep that it really does sound like it's far in the distance. And you can audibly tell how far away somebody is, not just because the volume of the footstep is different, but it sounds further away, right? And so with a lot of that, it's we wanted to also make sure that you could kind of tell what kind of terrain they might be walking on as well. Currently, you can kind of tell if it's maybe grass or dirt or something like that. But we have updated and improved a lot of the grass, crunchy grass, gravel, hard dirt, soft dirt, things kind of like this. And so they sound much different than they did before, trying to kind of push them even further so you could tell them apart clearly. There's also much better blending now between the growth stages. So you'll be able to, so there's much better blending between the growth stages as well. Previously, there was almost like there was a timing offset on some of the footsteps where when you were maybe between like subadult and adolescent or something kind of like this, when the footsteps were blending between your baby footsteps and your adult footsteps, they would almost sound like you had 2 footsteps playing at once for every 1 footstep that you actually take. And it was basically just an offset in the actual, I guess, like the audio cue it just didn't quite sound right. So we went through all of those very, very carefully and made sure that they're all lined up absolutely perfectly. And it's basically a completely seamless transition between all of the growth stages that you're going to be going through. So that should definitely help and avoid any confusion where you might feel like there was maybe somebody walking behind you when in fact it was actually just your own footsteps. Another thing was, so all of those footprints are coming together in the next patch, and it really, from all the playtesting that I've done and based on some of the community feedback on the public test branch, it seems like people have been kind of enjoying it. It really, I guess, like adds a bunch of the environmental ambience to the game that's kind of been lacking in the past. So I definitely hope you guys enjoy it. Some of the things that I'd also like to kind of bring up is, the footsteps are great, but I think there's a lot of actual, there's a lot of other things that we can do to improve the way that the game sounds. Some of the future audio improvements that I really want to work on are just the environmental kind of ambient sounds. We've actually already implemented a system, or I guess like improved upon an existing system that we already had, where we can play different soundscapes depending on the biome type. As an example, you walk into the swamp and you'll start hearing like a frog chorus, as opposed to maybe walking in a meadow and you hear chirping kind of bird sounds and crickets and things like this. So that's been implemented, and that should be going out with this patch as well. But the second thing that I really wanted to do was have better 3D spatialized sounds. And I guess what I mean by that is if you're walking around, you might hear a tree creaking sound, and it's not just this this omnipotent tree, sort of, you can hear it all around you. It's more so like a very directional. That tree creak came from the left, and that tree was to my left, and it kind of made sense, and it kind of has this more of an immersive feeling as opposed to just a kind of like a sound and like a wall of noise that's just kind of heard all around you regardless of the direction, if that makes sense. So the 3D spatialized sounds, definitely would love to take a look at that. But for now, the next big thing that we're going to be working on are the distant dinosaur calls. So that's going to really add a lot to, I guess, the big thing that I'm looking forward to that one is being able to hear other players at a distance and be able to tell, similar to the footsteps, how far away they are based on the way that their call, like the dinosaur's call sounds. In this case, stuff like a Tyrannosaurus broadcast call, for example, would really reach very far. And, because the point of the broadcast call really is to signal, hey, I'm over here, come get me, or come find me, right? So things like the broadcast calls, and especially things like the aggressive calls, have them travel very, very far. Players can really hear them from far distances. So we'll be working on that one and making sure that they sound good at a distance, just like the footsteps. And yeah, that's it really for some of the upcoming audio stuff.
And for the broadcast call, sometimes it's a victory roll, right?
Yeah, you're adult Rex and you kill the baby Campto, you must broadcast. It's like a rule.
Makes sense. Cool. So we're just going to jump into some player questions. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the TLCs and how they work and what's going on with the Barsboldia TLC.
Oh, the Barsboldia TLC. Yeah, I read a lot of YouTube and social media comments kind of talking about people. Well, really in general, people are looking forward to any TLCs. But I want to talk about the Barsboldia TLC first. We did promise the Barsboldia TLC a while ago. I think it was sometime last year. And so we did talk about the Barsboldia TLC recently. And the thing with the Barsboldia TLC is that in order for us to really do it right, we know that the Barsboldia is going to rely a lot on the area of effect attacks. So stuff like a tail slam, stomps, things kind of like this, because it is a massive herbivore and it's got to use its bulk, right? That's a no-brainer. But the problem is the area of effect attacks that we currently have in the game, while they get the job done, they are definitely lacking in a bunch of ways. There's a few issues with it that's difficult to make it the core mechanic of a new TLC dinosaur. As an example, you can't really hit flying creatures with the AoE attacks right now. Another example, like a limitation, is if, let's say, you're standing on a cliff, if you do a area of effect slam, if there's someone standing far below you, it can actually hit them still. There's also no locational damage. So, if just the tip of somebody's tail is within your area of effect attack stomp, let's say, it'll still do the same amount of damage as if it was a body shot, right? It's a little bit unfair in that regard. And, as an artist, I also feel like the radius of the area of effect attack isn't really clearly communicated with the particle effect, that like kind of shockwave effect that comes down. And it's kind of hard to determine exactly where you'll get hit by the attack if that visualization isn't very clear. So, all of those things I want to see if we can get them fixed up and really bug tested and make sure they're in a really good place before we put out a dinosaur where its TLC is pretty much completely dependent on that mechanic working well. Now, that being said, in terms of like when will the Barsboldia TLC be released, I can't give you an exact date, but we actually do have the AoE improvements nearly finished at this point, and it addresses all of the issues that I just mentioned and more. But it's still being tested and bug fixed. But once that's done, we'll be working on the Barsboldia TLC very soon, right after that. So hopefully that makes sense.
Yeah, just to expand on that, some of the reason why we can't give exact dates for things coming out is dependent on certification, like Nintendo Switch certification, stuff like that. Other times it's just developers getting sick or needing to take a break because they're getting burnt out and working on the same thing over again. So it can be kind of pretty hard to predict exact dates, but We understand that everyone's excited about dinosaur TLCs, and we'll get as many as we can done. The main problem is there's over 76 dinosaurs, so it's going to take a while, and we want to take our time on each dinosaur TLC and make sure they're unique and stand out and add new mechanics and stuff like that.
Yeah, you have to sort of think, well, if there's so many dinosaurs, and let's say even if you're going blazing fast and it might take you maybe 2 weeks to get the TLC done, well, if you expand that out over, 30 plus dinosaurs, that's still going to take months and months. So we're working through them as we go. And we want to make sure we don't just focus on TLCs. There's also maybe new creatures that we'd like to add or new systems that need to be updated or improved. And it definitely overlaps a lot. So but we'll keep you updated on what's kind of coming up next. And for sure, yeah.
Cool. If you want to just tell us a little bit about why we make dinosaur TLCs and kind of what's the goals behind them.
Yeah. So for the dinosaur TLCs, you know, it's in the name, right? The tender loving care. We do have a lot of content in the game that's actually, at this point, it's getting on for 5 years old, right? Some of the first dinosaurs that we added to the game that I worked on, I modeled them back when I was just beginning to model. It's kind of my first work there. And looking back at it now, it's definitely, it has a soft spot in your heart, but I think to yourself, we could really make this look better. We could have the animations just look stellar. We could improve the textures and, for a lot of them as well. So they're just kind of lacking in their abilities. They don't have something that makes them unique. It doesn't have a reason to play one dinosaur over the other sometimes. So for a lot of them, it's just making sure that every dinosaur that's getting its TLC has a unique play style and some kind of interesting and unique abilities. Try to introduce sort of like something novel, new for each dinosaur when it gets its TLC, but also try not to implement too many things where it's a bit overwhelming and hard to make it so it's not overwhelming and it's almost like there's not too many mechanics that are kind of jammed into the game and it's hard to fully understand what every dinosaur is doing or projecting or make sure that it's simple to follow along all of the attacks that other players are doing and the base mechanics that the game is the core of the game is centered around. We also, one thing that I've been trying to be very careful of when we're designing them is making sure there's not too many activatable abilities. Passive abilities are fine, but I've definitely found as a player, once there's maybe more than 4 or maybe 5 activatable abilities, it's very complex, especially if you're trying to play the game on a controller. Having too many abilities that you're using in very quick rotation can sometimes get a little bit overwhelming, at least for me. So we've been trying to keep that a little more manageable in that regard as well. And of course, for a lot of the TLCs, we always make sure to have improved animations and we update the model sometimes and make sure that even some of the older dinosaurs are visually consistent with each other. And so if you look at a dinosaur, they all feel as though they have the same kind of level to them and the same cohesion across the board. So that's kind of some of the things that we're looking for when it comes to TLCs. And I would definitely like to mention that pretty much all of the TLCs, we kind of approach them in a unique way where we think to ourselves, what role does this dinosaur fulfill in the gameplay? And what can we do to really push it that way? Even if we introduce some kind of interesting mechanics or things that might be a little bit out of the box, it's always just trying to make that dinosaur unique from anything else on the roster.
Cool. So what dinosaurs are getting TLCs and how do you decide when to give a dinosaur a TLC?
Right. So in general, pretty much every dinosaur released before the Hatzegopteryx will be getting a TLC at some point. So some of them have already actually gotten their TLCs. As an example, there was like Lambeosaurus and Kentrosaurus. Those are just some examples of TLCs that we're pretty happy with because, they previously, before their TLCs, they only had maybe 1 or 2 attacks, didn't really have anything unique about them. But now they have unique attacks, some effects, they have new calls, vocal abilities, they have movement abilities, things kind of like this. And they're also completely different from other dinosaurs that are of a similar size. So Lambeosaurus is very unique among its sort of size of that herbivore dinosaur. And similarly, Kentrosaurus, it's very mobile. It does bleed. It's very different from anything else in its tier, if that makes sense. But yeah, you can definitely expect. I can't give you any ETAs, of course, but in general, we'll be grabbing dinosaurs to do TLCs for as we have the base underlying mechanics for them done, like I mentioned with the Barsboldia. As long as it's the underlying mechanics are in a good place, we feel very confident about getting a TLC out for them for sure. So hopefully that makes sense.
On Discord, James Gicker asks, what is your progress on the game modes?
Right. Okay. So for the game modes, well, there's definitely been progress. But before I get into that, I wanted to mention why it's sort of taking so long to get the game modes done. So there's actually a couple things that were preventing the game modes from releasing. The first was basically just issues with game performance on certain consoles and lower end phones. Having 50 players up on your screen can definitely reduce your frame rate considerably. It could maybe be cut in half sometimes just for the sheer amount of creatures that were on screen. And it was kind of tough if we wanted to ship something like Team Deathmatch, where you've got basically a big old mosh pit and everyone's fighting. um, it just seemed like it would kind of be a bit rough for a lot of players who are on the lower end devices. So we've kind of stepped back and done a bunch of performance improvements to the game to try and make sure that at least that gets impacted as little as possible. So we've improved performance by about 20% since we initially started, and we're definitely looking to try and go further, just to try and keep that under wraps. And then secondly, we had a bit of like a design issue with the game modes in a certain way. It's more of a technical issue than anything. But the game modes are intrinsically tied to a single map. You download the game mode mod, and as an example, let's grab you were doing Capture the Egg, right? So you download Capture the Egg mod, and it actually came with a map like baked into the mod itself. And the map would have, let's say, an egg delivery point pre-placed on the map, and like the capture points and maybe buff items on the map and things like this. And it was pretty much intrinsically tied to that map, and it was impossible to use on a different map. So if you had downloaded some other mod map and also downloaded the Capture the Egg mode, you wouldn't be able to really do anything with it. It was just impossible to use. Which might have been fine for an initial release, let's say, but what I really wanted to do was release it so it's fully compatible with all mods, regardless of the map, and for it to work really well and seamlessly in that regard. So, what we've actually done instead, and what we've been working on, is pretty much converting the entire game mode system into using creator mode assets. If you're not familiar with creator mode, it's almost like a dungeon master style game mode where you can kind of fly around in a little camera, like an admin camera mode, and you can place down objects on the map, and you can drag players around, and you can set custom settings and things like this. So what we've actually done is taken the game mode system and turned them into these creator mode assets and these objects that you can place around the map. So basically now you can download any map you like, any mod map, or use an official map like Panjura or Gondwa. And you can create your own layout with the creator mode objects. So you can fly around, you can place down capture points, you can place down egg spawning points, things kind of like this. And you can also use it pretty much with any map you like, even mod maps. So it's very flexible now. It took a little bit of work, but it seems to be working quite well, and we'll probably end up doing testing for it soon. Additionally, another thing that we wanted to think about and we've already implemented is the ability for a modder themselves in their map to almost like pre-bake game mode settings into their map. And what that means is they basically create a little sub-level on their map that's used if a game mode is detected, like a compatible game mode is detected and that map is loaded up. As an example, maybe a modder has created a really large open world map that's got maybe islands all over the place and a big volcano in the middle. Who knows, right? And normally, if you're playing on the regular game mode, survival, that map works fine, right? But once you load up both that game mode, both that map and let's say team deathmatch, it'll detect that and automatically load in maybe like a custom little arena that's in the sub level, some extra rocks that might load in, or some moves around some of the spawn points. So you spawn maybe in the middle of the volcano, and that's where the deathmatch pit is basically. So there's things kind of like this where you'll be able to the modder themselves will have a lot more flexibility in creating that. And if you don't want to use that sub level system, that's totally fine. You can always just custom place down the creator mode objects otherwise, which is great. So it did take a little bit of time to convert everything, and we're still definitely working on testing it, but I definitely think that we'll be able to do public tests pretty soon in the future. So hopefully that answers your question there, James, on the game mode stuff. And yeah, do we have any other questions?
Sure, I can probably get this question. Dirt on Discord asks, will we see the old referral skins again? So with the referral system, we've had this in mind for a while, but we wanted a cycling system where if you earned past the 6 skins available that you can earn, that you start earning previous skins. So that's our current plan around it, but a lot of the communities requested that they get potentially access to the old referral skins, and the plan is to make them available when we get that system done.
Yeah, and I'd like to just, I guess, also comment with the referral system, because we're creating our own custom backend, creating something like the referral system, it does take a lot of time. And it's not like we're just using some other kind of out of the box solution. So it takes a lot of developer time to set up a lot of these systems, and so it's a matter of kind of prioritizing. And it's definitely a high priority because we know a lot of people love those skins, but it's also takes a lot of time and bug testing and making sure everything works seamlessly and not cause any issues with skin claims or the referral system not working correctly and things like that. So we're always just trying to be really mindful. But yeah, okay.
Sure, I'll get the next one. So 28WD on Discord asks, what types of quests will be added in the future? Could you give us an idea of what the upgraded quest system will look like?
Oh, yeah. We've been working a lot on the quest system. I guess we haven't really been talking about it really in previous dev blogs, but it's been ongoing for at least 5 or 6 months at this point. There's How do I get into it? So I wanted to sort of mention some of the things that the new quest does. Sorry, I wanted to mention some of the things that the new quest system um, does as a general overview and why we're kind of doing that. So the number one thing that the new quest system has is we're moving away from POI based questing. So the current method, of course, is you run into a POI, maybe you run into Spine Lizard Lagoon, and there's quests that will kind of appear for you to complete. And then once those are completed, well, you move on to the next area, and those appear, and you complete them. And that system works okay, but what I think we're really leaning towards is more of a quest that's more it's more permanent. I shouldn't say permanent; it's more persistent, where you can walk out of areas and you're no longer going to have the quest failing kind of pop up dialogue mentioning that if you leave the area, the quest is just going to basically disappear, right? So it'll be more permanent. You'll have a quest log. The way that the quest actually gets started is because you've interacted with an NPC or entered a very specific area, like a den, let's say, that might trigger something specific to happen. And it's not necessarily because you entered a large area. A lot more quests will be like in your quest log as well, and they can be tracked. And there's also going to have the mini map and the larger map that you can pull up will actually show the general area of where quests are located. So even if you're halfway across the map and you don't really remember what stage you were in a quest, you'll be able to kind of look at it and see, all right, it was in Spine Lizard Lagoon. I remember this now. And you can go back to the area. It'll let you know. So that's for some of what we're changing. But the biggest thing of like what we're actively working on right now for the questing system is we've completely created it's basically an entirely new system. It's completely separated from the old system. And the way it's been constructed is more like a building block, almost like a programming language, even. And the way that it kind of works, it's like a task based objectives, almost like a flow chart. And so, as an example, let's say you might have a quest and it begins by interacting with an NPC dinosaur, right? And then from there, it might ask you to follow a critter's trail and then maybe hunt the critter. And then from its corpse, you'll be able to grab a unique quest item. And then you could maybe return it to the NPC dinosaur. And then after that, you earn a reward, like maybe a unique skin or an emote. And so it's done in a way where these are all very modular. And if you want to change it out to be, instead of saying you need to grab a unique quest item from the corpse of the critter, it could be maybe there's some other kind of, maybe there's a secondary critter that you might need to follow and catch instead. And, there's a lot more of like a branching path that could be taken. And it's very different from the current system where it's basically just very rigid in what you can actually do with the quests. The current quest system is collect this thing, travel to this area, or kill this thing. And there's not really an easy way to kind of combine them or guide players around the map in any way. So the new system, very excited for it. So like in terms of what we're actively working on right now as well, is we're working on designing and creating the quests themselves. We're working on making the new quest items, so some of the art for that. And then we're also working on expanding the functionality of the quest system out. So while we might have, let's say, following a critter's trail implemented, we might not yet have spawning that unique quest item from its corpse. So there's just these different building blocks that might not be fully, completed yet. We're still working on them. And it is still heavily work in progress. I can't give you any ETAs on when it's going to be done, but I'll definitely, we'll keep some updates going in these podcasts and also on our dev blogs as well. So definitely keep an ear out for that.
Yeah, just to expand on the quest system, this is probably the most desired feature from our player base. A lot of the questions are about why is the quest system taking so long? I think on a dev blog, it was originally promised last year. We basically got the core code of the quest system, the new quest system, done last year, but we have the difficult task now of making potentially hundreds of quests. And a programmer might spend a week or two on one specific type of quest, just because the quests are more in-depth now. But the plan is to eventually remove the current quests from Gondor and Panjura and make new quests that are more interactive. How it's going to roll out, we're going to slowly replace them over time when it's ready, but it'll take a while to get to. Basically, players that have been playing the game for several years now, for example, 5 years, they might be feeling a little bit burnt out because the game kind of can get repetitive because they're going through the game faster than we can make it. And we definitely encourage those players to potentially consider taking a break. We'll get this new quest system done. You can come back and the game will be a little more fun and enjoyable.
Yeah, I think some of the interesting things as well is it's a little bit of a side note, but one thing that we've been very interested in implementing as well is the metric system. And what the metric system is, it's basically the game is able to track what things you're doing in game and give you rewards based on that. So you might be familiar with things like, an achievement in a game where it's like, hey, complete level 3 on hard difficulty, right? Things like that are being tracked by the game. And currently, Path of Titans doesn't have a great way of tracking things that's not necessarily as simple as completing a quest and getting marks, right? So there's not really a way in game to figure out, hey, you killed 3 alpha critter, like 3 alpha didelphodons. Here is an interesting reward. It's not a quest. It's like a separate reward. So with the metric system, once we're able to track all of those things, the really cool thing is we'll be able to start implementing it. It's not exactly a quest, but it'll be additional things you can do in the game to have new unlockable items. So we've actually been working on a lot of emotes and skins and all of these things, like a lot of art assets and customization options and things that will be tied to this metric system. So even if you've completed all of the quests in the game and you feel burnt out, let's say, on just doing quests, there's actually a lot of interesting metrics. I should say almost like stats, like character stats that you can work on. Things like as a Camptosaurus kill a Tyrannosaurus, let's say, right? Or interesting challenges that you can try and work on that can give you some really cool skins and other kinds of rewards. So, though that also similar to the refer a friend skin, it's very difficult to update all of this because we are running our own backend and making sure that it can track with your Alderon Games account across different platforms that you might be playing on, across your different devices. We just need to make sure that all of that is synced up really clearly. And then, of course, all your rewards can transition clearly as well. So, yeah, that's kind of some of the other fun things that are coming that are definitely intrinsically tied to kind of like a questing, unlocking content system like that.
So the next question, David on Discord asks, is the pod team working on additional emotes for the current roster?
So, like I mentioned, we do have the metric system coming in. But before we can work on implementing new emotes, there's actually one other thing, and that is having a customizable emote wheel. So, obviously, there's only so many directions on a D-pad or so many buttons on a keyboard. If you had 100 emotes, it might just be kind of impossible to actually use all of them, right? So, what we're basically working on is the customizable emote wheel where you'll be able to, equip maybe 16, 24 emotes to your character, and then to kind of use those on a hotbar style system. And that we really do need to have that implemented realistically before we can start piling on the emotes that people can unlock. And then, of course, I don't want to implement any new emotes until we have the system in which to unlock the emotes done. So that'll be coming very soon once we can actually get all of these quests and achievements all finished up as well. So very excited for that. We've got a lot of them done.
Sure. NDP on Discord asks, what are some of the funniest or weirdest bugs people have reported? Any interesting stories behind finding them?
Matt, I remember ages ago we had during the very first sort of beta during our crowdfunding, there was one bug where in the character editing screen, there's kind of like that little character editor, almost like a little module. Like you could just test the character editor, you couldn't spawn. And we had that bug where the character in your character editor actually was still depleting its hunger and thirsts. And we had the player, he just kind of walked off, he went AFK for a bit and he came back and his dinosaur was just dead in the character creator. Do you remember that one? Oh my God.
Yeah, I remember that one. It was very funny. So we had to add a couple lines of code to make the dinosaur immune.
They're immune. Yeah, they're immune in the editor. That was a good one. I guess another one that comes to mind, we were working on the map, and when you load into an area, there's kind of like a little tile that it loads. It loads into the map. And so we had this issue where, for some reason, we were just walking into a certain area. I think it was Salt Flats on Gondwa, and walking into the area. Once the tile loaded, your dinosaur just started flying up in the sky. You're like a Latin, and you just sort of fly up and hit the ceiling hitbox, and we're like, what on earth is going on? And it was some very odd Unreal Engine bug where a piece of foliage like a tree was assigned to one tile but actually it loaded into the previous tile, and something about having that desync in the trees really just goofed it up, and we just had this flying Latin all over the place. It was so confusing. Took ages to figure out what the heck was going on. But that's a good one too. I remember that one.
So next question, this is from our contact form or email. So Garrett asks, I know the nesting mechanic is still new to the game, but is there plans to introduce new mechanics to nesting, like having visible eggs in the nest and more advanced incubation, etc.?
Well, definitely yes on the visible eggs. I'm very interested in having that one done. It's a matter of kind of just figuring out what's the higher priority work on at the moment. So definitely visible eggs. Another thing I'd like to see in the future. This is more when we end up working on like improvements to the food and diet system. But what I'd love to see is players being able to raid a nest and kind of steal eggs from it. In such a way where you can either eat the egg or you can maybe bring it to your own nest, or things kind of like this where there's a little bit more interactivity with other players there. And in terms of other mechanics, I know we have heard some players really looking to see if there could be a mother and father dinosaur. Currently you've got just one single parent, and that's kind of the owner of the nest. And while you can add people to your family and add people to your group and they can help out, they're never really part of the actual family tree. And some of the issues that we're kind of running into is the size of the family tree. It becomes a little bit of a nightmare when you have, let's say, the mother, father, then all of their siblings, or sorry, all of their children, and then all of their children's siblings, and the amount of characters that have to be saved and loaded. It gets a little bit of a nightmare. We're definitely interested in taking a look into it in the future, perhaps, because I know a lot of the more role playing oriented players would love to see like a mother and father in the family tree and some kind of an interaction where there has to be two players at once to actually either incubate or start the egg, or feed the hatchlings or things like this. But when we were initially designing the system, we did want to make it as accessible as possible. And that's why we even have the adoption mechanic. So just if you're a single player, you can still have a really fun time and play with other people, even if you don't necessarily have kind of like your partner or your second in command to be able to do the father and mother pairing. But I do think it would be definitely cool to do in the future.
So Dan asks by email, have you considered doing a TLC on Panjura? Many players love that map, and we would like to. Thanks for your attention.
Yeah, absolutely. Panjura is going to definitely get its TLC sometime in the future. I guess I guess this does tie a little bit into some of the foliage that we've been working on. In this upcoming patch, you'll see that all of the foliage actually kind of looks a little bit different now, and it moves in the wind. Grass is rippling in the wind. You've got the trees swaying in the breeze now. And really, just I was working on this for a little while. All of the trees and all of the foliage are now on their own kind of shader. And what it lets me do is any tweaks that I need to make across the foliage for the game is now very easy. It's sort of like one variable, and there you go. It's applied to all the foliage. And this also improves the memory and performance as well. And so when we're working on something like Panjura in the future, while we're not actively working on it right now, because a lot of our focus is indeed on the quest system and things like this, once we are ready to go and start really working on Panjura, it should be actually quite fast in comparison to maybe what it might be in the past. Now, in terms of what we would actually be doing on Panjura, the biggest thing that I'd be interested in doing with a TLC is making sure that flyers are able to run on the map. Right now, Panjura is just not very compatible with flyers because it was created before we had flyers. So things like distant terrain and the rendering distance of certain things, and the exterior like collision hitboxes, and there's a lot of things that could be done to improve it. And another thing that I really want to do with any kind of a Panjura TLC is to introduce a lot more water and waterways for our swimming creatures to make them much more viable on the map as well. Being a Urinosaurus on the map is just not really a fun time right now, unfortunately. So that's kind of some of the big ones there. I don't know exactly when we'll be working on it because I think there's other things that are more important to work on the game right now. But eventually we will get there, and we'll absolutely give it the TLC that it deserves, for sure.
So one last question before we head off.
Sure.
Chimp on email asks, are you guys ever going to do a river TLC for soccer? Enemy players shouldn't be able to be on the land and look into the water at an angle seeing everything underwater. Players shouldn't be able to look underwater while swimming either. It defeats the whole purpose of soccer being an ambush carny. So I think that what this player is talking about here, that another dinosaur can kind of go to the edge of the water and use their camera and kind of look underwater even though they're not in the water and kind of see there's a sucker hiding there, and it kind of ruins the surprise of hunting stuff like that.
Yeah, that's very interesting. I can definitely see where you're coming from. I guess here's the thing: we do have an ability called nictitating membrane that a lot of the swimmers can use, where it actually makes um, their ability to see underwater even greater. Right, so it removes some of the fog. And similarly, if we wanted to, we could. I haven't actually, I haven't thought too carefully about implementing this, but I can see that being quite easy to implement. Where basically we would reverse the effect of nictitating membrane for a land creature. You know, maybe an Eotriceratops has very poor underwater eyesight, so even if you dip your camera underwater, you can't see too well. That being said, I wouldn't be very interested in making the water completely opaque where you can't see anything at all. It maybe should just be a smaller radius around you in which you can see, because it is possible to drown if you swim for too long. You'll actually start dipping underwater, and if during that time you just couldn't see anything, I feel like it would be very difficult for the player who's just trying to swim across the lake, and they're kind of like at the tail end of their stamina, and they're like, where's land? I can't tell where I am. I just have a big brown box in front of my screen. I can't see what's going on. So we'll have to find, if we were to do that, we'd have to find a good middle ground, I'd say. But it's definitely doable. And just off the top of my head, I can think of a couple ways in which we could have implemented something like that. So I think that's a good suggestion. We'll have to think about it for sure. Thank you.
I wonder if we can add like collision to the water if you're not in it or not near it to maybe put it, like just have your camera collide with the surface of water and not go under it kind of thing or not.
Yeah, we actually do have a system like that already, where if you just touch the camera with your, just touch the surface of the water with your camera, it'll actually kind of like jump a little bit and like be a little sticky. So we could probably, yeah, I could totally see that working too if we wanted to do that. Well, think about it for sure. Thank you.
Cool. Well, that's it for the time being. We're going to get to more of these questions in the next episode, and I appreciate your support. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, thanks everyone. If you do have any other questions, definitely feel free. We have a channel on Discord, or you can send us an email. We'll post the email in the description in case you're curious. And yeah, it's been great answering these questions. I hope everyone I hope this podcast has shown a little bit more into the insight about what we're working on behind the scenes. Not everything is necessarily always covered in a not everything is necessarily covered in a dev blog. And while there's a lot of things that we're working on behind the scenes, we sometimes are hesitant to mention them or bring them up before they're in a, I guess, more of a presentable, visually interesting state, if that makes sense. But being able to bring up some of these things just as a, just here talking about them, it definitely helps, because it's hard to show a work in progress quest system, for example, when it's basically just a bunch of code, if that makes sense. But anyways, thank you so much for all the questions. I hope we answered them adequately for everybody. And if you're very interested in seeing the next one, well, just let us know. Let us know if you like this podcast, if you like the episode. Yeah, thank you so much.
Cool. That's it. I'll see you later.